Hello my dears, today is a bit of an updated version of my former ABA video. This does not mean that the other one is wrong, and it does not mean that I have suddenly become pro-ABA, don't worry, but in the last few weeks-ish, many BIPOC creators that I look up to, like at Neurodivergent Activist, at Fidgets and Fries, at Nigh Functioning Autism, at ND Narratives, Joy F. Johnson, Audio Analyst, Autism in Black, and Each Official, made posts about the nuances of ABA therapy and the intersections with performative activism and racism. And so while at the time I thought that my last video kind of covered all of the points, I think I'm at a different point in my relationship to the world, to my emotions, to my trauma than I was just a year ago. And I also now have a pretty intimate understanding with what good operant conditioning looks like versus bad operant conditioning looks like, because I am a service dog trainer now, which we're going to get to in a couple weeks. But I am hoping that I can this time around make a less biased video. And with that, let us dive in. Also, obviously content warning for conversion therapy, abuse, ABA, consent, shock therapy, gaslighting, and everything else in that category. If that is really, really difficult for you, I completely understand. Truly, I do. And if you want to support me and not watch this video, that's totally fine. I have a really fun video that I made last week about architecture, which you can find in the card above. But also, as I often say with my hard topic videos, I'm not going to talk about something upsetting if there's not an explicit and important reason for needing to do that. And so if you have these spoons to watch this, it is really important, and I would love it if you did. If you're unfamiliar with the practices of applied behavioral analysis, or ABA, how it works and how it can be really harmful, you may want to start by watching my original ABA video, which I've linked in the card above. As a quick overview, ABA, which is often called autism conversion therapy, is a type of behavioral therapy that uses operant conditioning methods to get autistic children to do certain tasks and to extinguish certain traits. The intentions can be good, though the origin, it's important to recognize, is electroshock conversion therapy, and the results can also be the intended results. They are just also very typically a byproduct of PTSD and other mental health issues. And I will personally vouch for the fact that my year in an ABA type program when I was younger caused me to get into some really abusive situations later in life that caused a lot of my permanent disabilities now. So that is a thing that we do need to acknowledge. Now, as we talked about in my last video about how some people call it dog training for children, and how a dog trainer said there was no relation because he would absolutely never treat a dog that way, and I just left that quote at that in my video because it is an important notion and I still totally believe it. But now that I am a service dog trainer, I can actually tell you the fundamental differences and what's positive and what's negative. So yes, we are going to talk about operant conditioning right now. Get ready for your intro psych lesson. So basically there are 4 kinds of operant conditioning. The first 2 are types of reinforcement, which increases a behavior, and the second 2 are punishment, which decreases a behavior. So positive reinforcement is when you add an appetitive or a good thing to increase the behavior. For example, if your kid pees in the potty when you're potty training them, they get an M&M as a reward. Then there's negative reinforcement, which is removing an aversive to increase behavior, like just screaming continuously 24/7 until your child pees in the potty and then you stop screaming once they, do that. A positive punishment is when you add an aversive to decrease a behavior, for example, yelling at your child for having an accident, and then negative punishment is removing an appetitive to decrease behavior. For example, if they have an accident and then as a result you take away their toy. Now when it comes to dog training, positive reinforcement is almost actually exclusively what we use for them, because then the dog knows what we expect of it and continues to do those behaviors. We do use just a small bit of negative punishment, but that's kind of like if you're playing with a tug toy and then they bite you, you put away the toy until they've calmed down and then you give them a chance to try again. And no matter what, the interaction stays positive, clear, simple, and the expectations are made very clear. And we also never say the word no to our dogs. And that may seem like it doesn't work and it's not a good version of parenting, but it turns out that they actually learn a lot of things and they enjoy the things that they're doing and they feel proud that they're doing a good job, and will start doing these tasks without any treats involved just because they like to and it brings them joy. Not to mention that they are incredibly, incredibly well behaved and well adjusted to the world and things that would make them anxious. So what is the difference between this and ABA? Well, rather than keeping things consistent from day one, ABA is a little bit more confusing. The first part is called pairing, and that is when a child gets showered with gifts and love and fun, and it gets them to trust those people in that space and get excited to go to therapy every week. And then once that process is complete, they take those things away anyway and only use them as rewards for what they deem to be good behavior. And this leads kids to get really confused and distressed because all of a sudden this place that they were comfortable in has completely changed for no apparent reason, and nobody is giving you the sensory things that you want or need to cope with the world, which they used to give you and completely and totally accept. So now you're ashamed of those things because you were accepted and suddenly you're not, so they must be wrong. And that's just really, really confusing for anybody. Now, to compare this with dog training again, from day one of training, which is very, very early in their lives, is when they start to learn that kibble is earned when they are calm and gentle. And if they mess up, that's okay. It's hard to stop wiggling when you're so small and you're so excited. And we still reward them for trying their best because they make it clear that they're trying their best with their body language. And we don't get mad at them, and we don't yell at them, and we don't even say no. And since they know from day one that kibble is to be earned and that extra good behaviors get better treats, then they want to behave and they're proud of themselves for doing the thing. Like, I can very easily read dog body language, and like the second you put on their service dog vest, they're practically prancing. They're like, I'm doing such a good job. I'm so good. You should be so proud of me. They're so excited and proud of what they do. So from the beginning, we don't go, oh yes, you may have all of the kibble and all of the love, regardless of your behavior. We'll give you everything and pay all the attention to you, and then suddenly go, actually, we're taking away your food bowl. You're never going to see it again, and we're only rewarding behaviors that we like, and there's little wiggle room for you, which is kind of how ABA works. And that's an important distinction when it comes to behavior. There is no trust broken in this situation because the expectations have been set from day one, and we understand that, well, they're a dog and they're trying their very best. And if they mess up, at least early on when they're learning, that's okay. That's normal. That's part of the learning process. Another important distinction between dog training and ABA is understanding communication. So in ABA, if you don't do what a therapist wants you to, you're just typically ignored. And it's not hard to find horror stories of kids who were, having a meltdown and they were just locked in a small closet and ignored as they continued to cry, even though they were trying to communicate. And while it is important to recognize that ignoring unwanted behavior can and does often extinguish the negative behavior, there's a specific execution flaw here. So with service dogs, for example, they have to have a minimum amount of crate time during the day so that they can rest and they can learn to self-regulate, which is very important. If they bark in their crate, our first guess is that they might be trying to communicate that they have to go to the bathroom. So we take them outside and we go to the bathroom, and then we bring them back in and we put them right back on their crate. We don't play with them, we don't interact, we don't talk to them, all of that stuff. Because if we did that, that would positively reinforce for them that if they crate bark, then they can get to play with us, which we don't want that behavior. But after they've been given a chance to go to the bathroom, we ignore further crate barking. In ABA, if a child is having a screaming meltdown, that child is typically just ignored from the beginning, even though the source of that behavior is, in all likelihood, some sort of sensory need that they may be having. So for example, maybe the kid is having a meltdown because they're really, really hungry. And that meltdown is how they are trying to communicate to you that they are really hungry, but they don't have the words to explain that. And if they start to cry and you just go, this is bad behavior, and then promptly ignore them until they stop, they're going to stop the behavior. That is correct, but they're also never going to express that they're hungry again, and they're never going to learn how to express that they're hungry. They're just going to think to themselves, whatever I'm feeling isn't valid, it's not important enough, they don't really care, and just hide it inside and never express how they're feeling again. When with a dog, we would address the potential root causes of the issue, and then once we're sure that it's just them communicating that they want to play with us when they should actually be having quiet time, we ignore them until they take their quiet time and usually take the nap that they needed. It's important to recognize that every behavior is a form of communication, regardless of species. Your child is crying because they have needs, or maybe every time they scream and throw themselves on the ground, you give them a lollipop, and so they're just going to continue doing that behavior because they know they're going to get a lollipop. However you train them from day one is how they're going to act, and it's so much easier to train them when they are young than to continuously try to change a behavior later. Another aspect that I did not speak about in my last ABA video was, does it really work? And according to studies, not really. The amount of change across the board is quite minimal and not much different from the amount of change that a child would typically make without any therapy. And I will link these studies in the description if you want to look at them further. They're honestly quite bland. But I will say that while overall this therapy doesn't seem to work a whole ton, when you are a single parent with a 10-year-old who copes with sensory issues by bashing their head into a wall and they're not potty trained, having ABA correct those behaviors is absolutely life-changing. And that's where the real nuance comes in here. And the majority of what I'm going to say from now until the end of the video is a sort of meta-analysis of all of the posts from the creators I mentioned at the beginning of this video. I'm simply just compiling all of their ideas into one place to just give them out to you. And then I'm going to send you off into their direction because I cannot speak for their experiences. I'm not a person of color. I'm not a mother. I'm not trying to talk over them. I am trying my best not to whitewash what they have to say. I'm trying to give it to you as straight up as I possibly can. I'm simply just making myself a catalyst for this important information that I think that you should hear. And any racially marginalized peeps are very welcome to call me out in the comments if I mess up or don't accurately reflect what their experiences may be, though everybody's experience is different. So, as we spoke about in my autism and racism video, being a visibly autistic person is dangerous, regardless of your race. The thing is, if you are a white man repeating the same 3 words over and over again and flapping your hands and rocking back and forth as you walk down the street, you're considered creepy and people just avoid you. If you're a black man doing the same things, you're either arrested or you're dead. Unfortunately, that is just a fact. And so when it comes to raising a child of color, the parent realizes that in a situation like that, or any situation for that matter, skin color is the first thing that people perceive about them before they even think about disability. When for the white person, their actions are perceived first because we see white to be the default. And so parents have to teach their children to mask for safety, using their sirs and ma'ams, not raising their voices in public, and code switching, etc. And this isn't saying, hey, change yourself to fit in because, well, we don't like who you are and it makes us uncomfortable because we've internalized ableism. It's, hey, change yourself so that you don't get murdered. And that's an important distinction. It's not a survival mechanism to fit in and be liked. It's a survival mechanism, period. So being able to unmask, to walk around stimming and act more autistic in public and cope with anxiety how an autistic person naturally would is a luxury that most people of color cannot have for their own safety. I mean, sure, disabled people are a marginalized identity, but there are more intersections and marginalizations, and the more visible those marginalized identities are, the less privilege you have and the more masking you're required to do just to survive. And while we know from countless studies that autistic masking and other types of masking as well lead to mental health issues and suicidal ideation, if you're an autistic person of color, not masking leads to racial abuse, which also can cause suicidal ideation as well as hate crimes, and those can also kill. So either way, you have trauma and suicidal ideation, regardless of how you go about it. And whether this conformity is taught through ABA therapy or occupational therapy, through gentle parenting even, the lesson of you must conform to survive is always the one that they're going to need to learn at the end of the day. The only change here is the methods by which this lesson is being taught. Sure, it's harmful, but it does keep them safe. So what other option do they have? And on top of that, you throw in the fact that authorities watch minority people with kids for any slip up, any difference, and will immediately take your children away from you at any sign of something they vaguely don't like, even if you're trying your very, very best, because systemic issues. And then there are the low-income households with disabled children where the parents need to work 40 hours a week, but no daycare or school will take their disabled children because they're too much of a handful. And there are the families that are given no support to even try to seek out any of the alternatives to ABA because it's the only viable option for them. It's the only place that'll take their child, and it's the only thing that's covered by insurance. And rather than supporting these people, the autism community, well, we kind of just shame them for sending their children to ABA and calling them bad parents and sending hatred in their direction because we just like to keep on chanting over and over again that ABA is abuse. And no amount of shaming is going to magically create these new options for these families who are struggling. No amount of shaming is going to give them the support that they need. So you can remove ABA all you want, but just like we talked about earlier about how ignoring a child who's crying because they're hungry just makes them shut up about being hungry, but continues the issue of being hungry, you're ignoring the root cause of the situation. The root cause here is the hierarchical structure that we have in place, the one that wants to keep minorities down and pushes people of color all the way to the bottom. And if you dismantle ABA but then leave the hierarchy in place, all you're doing is removing the last support system that people of color have left, which only is going to greaten the divide between us. ABA practices have been around for centuries, and they will be around for centuries. The only reason that we're getting mad about this now is because this time it has a specific clinical name, and white people are being traumatized about it and have begun to speak out about it, and so people are listening. And all of these alternatives that we give as talking points, well, Those are cares and supports that privileged people have access to, while people without that privilege are just kind of left to struggle even more. So now let's take the idea of ABA, let's throw it out the window, and let's try to see what we can do within our community to offer equal opportunities to every single disabled child. Forgive me for forgetting which one of these people quoted this, but divided communities fighting amongst themselves will never end up helping any cause but the systems. So how can we use our privilege to help our marginalized siblings and bridge this gap? The biggest and most obvious answer is to dismantle the whole system. It's broken, it's beyond repair, and we just can't make it usable. So let's throw that out the window too, and just completely start over. And that, friends, it's an idea I completely and totally agree with. I think we should get rid of the system, but it also really, really frustrates me because it's so impractical, and the amount of people that I know that just sit around saying, dismantle the system, destroy the hierarchy, and then do absolutely nothing else at all and think that they are being, social justice warriors is a genuinely staggering number. And I know there's the master's tools won't dismantle the master's house thing, and again, I fully agree with it. But if we can at least start by dismantling little tiny pieces at a time so that it'll just fall apart on its own, that's a lot easier and more tangible. And I think that the first thing that we can do is to decenter ourselves from the narrative. That does not mean stop doing what you're doing. It does not mean stop educating, because every single person that's involved in this, every single person who's doing some education, who's teaching some things, it's important and doing a really great job. But anytime that we tell the story of a situation, we need to make sure that we tell the full story, including the perspectives we may not agree with, including the stories of people with different experiences than we have. We need to use our platforms as privileged people to center the voices of the underprivileged. So, go follow every single one of those people that I mentioned earlier on Instagram. I've linked them all in the description. We also need to make sure that we are working to be more understanding. It's really easy to just look at somebody's life and say ABA is abuse and your kid's an ABA, so you're a terrible person, and walk away. But we need to understand that everybody is genuinely trying their best, and their kid may be an ABA because they aren't educated about it. And then they learn, and then they can afford to send their child to a different type of therapy program. In that case, that's incredible. But also, if they are aware and they have no other choice, we need to understand and respect that choice too. I'm also not entirely familiar with what reformed ABA looks like, and for trauma reasons, I'm not going to look it up. I know I want to give you that source, but I really can't. But what I majorly know, at least from the autism community, is that because it's based on the same principles as the regular ABA, and therefore electroshock conversion therapy, it is really problematic at its core and it needs to be gotten rid of. However, and don't hate me for saying this, I don't think that it's impossible to think that an entire clinic of ABA therapists could just all of a sudden decide, you know what, we're not going to do this by the book, and then dive into the disability community, learn about what our needs are and how we work, and create a version that recognizes the roots of behaviors and treats us more like I treat the foster dogs that I train. In the same way that a lot of speech therapists are super patronizing to deaf patients, and a lot of others are just like, I'm giving you an extra tool for your tool book, but you can also still use sign language and be authentically capital D deaf as well. Now, whoever is about to write a comment saying we deserve more than dog training, reminder to check yourself and your species superiority, because we are animals too, and if an animal that relies on nonverbal communication and has sensory issues is able to learn perfect behaviors and find a lot of joy in their lives, as well as feel like they have a purpose and feel accomplished and prideful for what they're doing, why shouldn't we want that for our children, autistic or not? Because obviously the system of ABA is completely messed up, but in the same way that the system of education in our country is a complete disaster, and a bunch of teachers and professors are starting to realize that and then completely changing their class structure and ignoring a lot of the norms that they grew up with in their schooling to therefore make better classrooms for the people in the future like me today, well, I don't think that that's impossible for ABA. I really don't. But anyway, those are just some of the musings that I have on this topic. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I kind of felt like my other video on ABA was a little bit of a one-sided persuasive essay rather than the full picture of the situation, kind of pretty much since I've posted it. And I wasn't sure how I would go about making a part 2 until this topic kind of blew up on Instagram, and that kind of filled in a lot of the gaps for me so that I was able to make this. But let me know what you think in the comments. Please remember to be as kind and respectful as you humanly can. I know this is a divisive topic, but we need to be kind to each other because we do things better when we're a community, and uplift our marginalized friends. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for learning. You can always change your mind when you learn new things, and remember, your story isn't over. It is only just begun. I look forward to seeing you, my dear, in the next one.